Delivery driver hears child's request. Please follow me. What he sees is desperate. David was finishing his last delivery of the afternoon when he felt a small hand touch his arm. The 28-year-old delivery driver turned and saw a fair-haired boy who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. It was then that he heard the words that would change his life forever. "Please, follow me," said the boy, his voice trembling with desperation. David looked around. The street was empty. Only the yellow lights from the lampposts were beginning to turn on in the late afternoon in Riverside in Los Angeles. The boy was wearing a faded grey t-shirt and jeans with patches on the knees. "Hi, little one. Where are your parents?" asked David, crouching down to the child's level. "Please," repeated the boy, this time gripping the driver's red uniform tightly. "You need to follow me. It's urgent." There was something in the child's eyes that made David completely forget his safety protocols. A real urgency, a fear he couldn't disguise. The boy began to pull him by the hand, walking quickly along the uneven sidewalk. "Hold on, what's your name?" David tried, but the boy didn't stop. "I'll explain later. You need to come with me now," said the boy, almost running. David followed the child for 2 blocks until they reached a simple house with exposed brick, with a small garden in front where some yellow flowers grew. The iron gate was open and the boy ran in, signaling for David to follow. "My name is Ethan," the boy finally said, stopping at the front door. "And this is my home." Ethan opened the door, and David felt his heart tighten. On the floor of the small living room was an elderly woman with grey hair, unconscious. She looked to be in her early 60s and was breathing with difficulty. "Grandma Margaret!" shouted Ethan, running to her. "I brought help." David immediately knelt beside the woman and checked her pulse. It was weak but steady. He took his phone from his pocket and dialed the emergency number. "Hello, I need an ambulance urgently," he said, quickly giving the address. While they waited for help to arrive, Ethan sat on the floor next to his grandmother, holding her hand. "She collapsed here an hour ago," the boy explained, his eyes full of tears. "I didn't know what to do. Then I saw you passing by on the street and thought you could help." "You did the right thing, Ethan," said David, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "Where are your parents?" The question made Ethan lower his head. "I don't have parents. I mean, I do, but they don't live here. It's just me and Grandma Margaret. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later, and the paramedics quickly examined Mrs. Margaret. David watched closely, translating the medical questions for Ethan when necessary. "It's severe hypertension," one of the paramedics explained to David. "She'll need to be hospitalized for observation and medication adjustment." "Can I go with her?" asked Ethan desperately. "Do you have a guardian son?" questioned the paramedic. Ethan looked at David with pleading eyes. I take care of her. She takes care of me. It's just the 2 of us." David felt a tightness in his chest. He knew that situation all too well. He himself had been raised by his grandmother after his parents abandoned him when he was just 5 years old. "I'll go with him," David decided, "until we can locate a family member." At the hospital, while Mrs. Margaret was being examined by the doctors, David talked more with Ethan. He discovered that the boy had lived with his grandmother for 3 years, ever since his parents had separated in a messy way. "My mom, Jennifer, moved to Long Beach with her new boyfriend," told Ethan, swinging his legs on the waiting room chair. "She said she was going to find a better place for us to live, but she never came back." "And your father?" "Dad, Richard, lives up in Houston. He works for an oil company. He sends money every month, but he never comes to visit." David ran his hand through his hair, processing the information. A 7-year-old child taking care of a sick grandmother, practically abandoned by his parents. "Ethan, where are your parents' phone numbers?" The boy led him to the kitchen of the house, where a small address book was stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. David found the contacts and decided to call the father first. "Hello?" answered a male voice. "Hi, is this Richard, Ethan's father?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is David. I'm here with your son. Mrs. Margaret got sick and is in the hospital. There was a silence on the other end of the line. What do you mean? Who are you? Asked Richard with a suspicious tone. David explained the whole situation, from meeting Ethan on the street to the current moment at the hospital. Look, I can't leave Houston right now, said Richard after hearing everything. I'm in the middle of an important project at work. I can't just drop everything. Richard, we're talking about your son, insisted David. Ethan is alone. His grandmother is in the hospital. He needs you. Can you stay with him until I can get organized? Maybe I can pop over there this weekend. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. No, I can't stay with him. I don't even know you. I'm just a delivery driver who helped in an emergency. Then call Jennifer. She's the mother. The responsibility is more hers anyway. The call ended abruptly. David stared at the phone in disbelief. Ethan was standing in the kitchen doorway, having obviously heard the whole conversation. He's not coming, is he? Asked the boy in a small voice. David crouched down in front of Ethan. Let's call your mother too. Maybe she can come quicker. But the call to Jennifer was even worse. She answered hurriedly, clearly annoyed by the interruption. Jennifer, this is David. I'm here with Ethan. Your mother got sick, and... What mother? Oh, Margaret. Look, I can't come there now. I'm working and my husband doesn't like it when I get involved in problems from my previous family. Jennifer, Ethan is your son. I know who Ethan is, she replied coldly. But he's well taken care of by Margaret. He always has been. If she got sick, take her to the hospital and that's it. She is hospitalized. Ethan has nowhere to stay. Look for some relative, or leave him with a neighbor. I can't show up there now. What do you mean you can't? He's your son. You don't understand my situation. I'm rebuilding my life. I can't go back now. The call was ended. Ethan had heard everything and his tears were already running down his face. Nobody wants me anyway, the boy whispered. David felt anger growing in his chest. How could two adults abandon a child like that? He himself knew what it was like to be rejected by parents, but he never imagined he would see someone doing that to such a young child. Ethan, do you want to go back to the hospital to see your grandmother? The boy nodded his head, wiping his tears with his t-shirt sleeve. Back at the hospital, David went to talk to the doctors about Ethan's situation. Mrs. Margaret had woken up and was more stable, but would need to be hospitalized for at least a week for blood pressure regulation. Ethan, said Mrs. Margaret in a weak voice when she saw her grandson enter the room. Are you okay, my angel? Yes, Grandma. This man here, David, helped me. Mrs. Margaret looked at David with gratitude. Thank you so much, young man. I don't know how to thank you. David pulled up a chair and sat down next to the bed. Mrs. Margaret, I tried calling Ethan's parents, but neither of them can come right now. Your face closed up. I know how they are, she said sadly. That's why I take care of Ethan by myself. He doesn't deserve to go through this. What are we going to do? Ethan can't stay home alone. There's Mrs. Gladys, our neighbor. She's always offered to help. Maybe she can look after Ethan for a few days. That night, David walked Ethan over to the neighbor's house. Mrs. Gladys, a very kind 50-year-old woman, welcomed the boy with open arms. Of course you can stay here, my dear, she said, stroking Ethan's hair. You know the way, right? You've played here with my grandson many times. David left his phone number with Mrs. Gladys and promised Ethan he would return the next day to visit them at the hospital. But when he got home that night, David couldn't sleep. The image of Ethan asking for help on the street wouldn't leave his head. The way his parents had rejected their own son over the phone made him furious. The next day, David woke up early and went straight to the hospital before starting work. He found Ethan sleeping in a chair next to Mrs. Margaret's bed. He didn't want to leave last night, explained Mrs. Margaret when David arrived. He said he wanted to stay with me. David woke Ethan up slowly. Good morning, champ. You slept here. Hi, David, said Ethan, rubbing his eyes. I was afraid Grandma would get sick again, and there'd be no one to help. Ethan, you're just a child. It's not your responsibility to take care of your grandmother. But if I don't take care of her, who will? The boy's question hit David like a punch in the stomach. He knew that feeling of being responsible for an adult while still a child all too well. It was exactly what he had felt when he took care of his own grandmother. "Where do you work, David?" asked Mrs. Margaret. "I'm a delivery driver for an app company. I work from 7 in the morning to 7 at night, Monday through Saturday." "Are you married? Do you have children?" David shook his head. "No, I live alone. I've never been married." Mrs. Margaret was silent for a moment, as if she was thinking about something. "David, can I ask you a very big favor?" "Of course, Mrs. Margaret. Could you keep an eye on Ethan while I'm here in the hospital? I know it's a lot of responsibility to ask of someone we don't know well, but I have no one else." Ethan looked at David with hope in his eyes. "Grandma, David has his own life. He can't be worrying about me." "Ethan," said David, crouching down in front of the boy, "I will take care of you while your grandmother is here. I promise." Ethan's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Really? Really? But we have to have a proper talk with your parents. They need to know about the situation and take responsibility." During the following week, David completely rearranged his life around Ethan. He took the boy to school in the morning, worked during the day, picked Ethan up in the late afternoon, and they went together to the hospital to visit Mrs. Margaret. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. At night, they would go back to Ethan's house, where David would help him with his homework and make dinner. It was a routine David had never experienced, but it filled him in a strange way. Ethan was a smart and mature boy for his age. He knew how to cook scrambled eggs, wash the dishes, and even sort the laundry. It was obvious he had learned to fend for himself from a very young age. "David," Ethan said one night while they were having dinner together, "why are you helping me?" David stopped chewing and looked at the boy. "Why do you think?" "I don't know. Everyone always says they don't have time for me, but you do." David felt his heart tighten. "Ethan, everyone deserves to have someone who cares, especially children. Did your parents care about you?" The question caught David off guard. He had never talked about his own childhood with anyone. "My parents, they didn't take care of me either. I was raised by my grandmother just like you." Ethan stopped eating and stared intently at David. "Just like me?" "Just like you. My grandmother was everything to me. She took care of me until I turned 18. "And where is she now?" David swallowed hard before answering. "She passed away 5 years ago, lung cancer." Ethan was silent for a long moment. "Were you scared when you were little?" "Very scared," admitted David. "Scared that my grandmother would get sick. Scared that I'd be left alone. Scared of having no one. That's exactly how I feel." David got up from his chair and went over to Ethan, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "But you're not alone now. Your grandmother is going to be okay, and in the meantime, I'm here." On the 5th day of Mrs. Margaret's hospitalization, something unexpected happened. David was working when he received a call from Ethan's school. "Mr. David, I'm the principal at Ethan's school. I need to speak with you urgently." Did something happen to him? Actually, it happened here at the school. Ethan's father showed up wanting to take him out of class. David felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean? Is Richard there?" "Yes, and he's saying he's taking Ethan away right now, but the boy is crying he doesn't want to go. I'm calling because you're listed as the emergency contact on his file." David looked at the clock. It was 2 in the afternoon, and he was on the other side of the city making deliveries. "Please don't let Ethan leave until I get there. I'm on my way." David cancelled all his remaining deliveries for the day and rushed to the school. When he arrived, he found a scene that made him furious. Richard, a tall man of about 35, was arguing with the principal while Ethan hid behind the school secretary's desk. "Ethan!" David called out as soon as he entered the principal's office. The boy ran to him and clung to his waist. "David, don't let him take me," begged Ethan, his eyes full of tears. Richard looked David up and down with contempt. "So you're the famous David? Who do you think you are, meddling in my family?" "I'm someone who cares about Ethan," replied David, keeping his calm. "Something you clearly don't do. He's my son. I decide what's best for him. Where were you last week when he needed help? Where were you when his mother got sick? Richard turned red with anger. I was working, supporting my family. Ethan is your family too. Don't you dare lecture me. You don't know my situation. The school principal intervened. Gentlemen, let's all calm down. What's important here is Ethan's well-being. My son's well-being is my business, said Richard, trying to pull Ethan by the hand, but the boy resisted, holding on to David even tighter. I don't want to go, Dad. Please, I want to stay with Grandma Margaret and David. Ethan, you're coming with me right now, and that's final. Why now? Asked David. Why did you decide to be a father just now? Richard hesitated before answering. Because it's not right for a child to be with strangers. I was alone all week until you decided to show up, David countered. Where was your parental concern before? The truth was that Richard had received a call from Jennifer the day before. She was worried that the situation would attract attention from child services and wanted him to pick up Ethan to avoid legal problems. But Ethan didn't know that. All he knew was that the father who had abandoned him was there, trying to take him away from the people who actually cared for him. Dad, said Ethan with a firm voice for a 7-year-old, if you take me away now, I'll run away. I'll come back here anyway. Richard was shocked by his son's determination. Ethan, you can't talk to your father like that. You are my father, but David is the one who takes care of me. Ethan's words echoed through the room. Richard looked around and realized that everyone present saw him as the villain of the situation. All right, he said finally. But this isn't over. I'm going to seek my rights. Ethan is my son. Richard left the school, slamming the door. Ethan sighed with relief and hugged David. Thank you for not letting him take me. Always, Ethan. Always. That night at the hospital, David told Mrs. Margaret what had happened at school. I was afraid this would happen, she said, shaking her head. Richard only shows up when it's convenient for him. Mrs. Margaret, I think we need to resolve this situation once and for all. Ethan can't live in this uncertainty. What do you suggest? I think we should look for a lawyer, formalize the custody. Ethan can't continue in a situation where his parents appear and disappear as they please. Mrs. Margaret became thoughtful. David, can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you care so much about Ethan? You've only known each other for a week. David looked out the hospital window, watching the city lights turn on. Because I see what I was in him, he said finally. A scared child, trying to be strong, taking care of those he loves. No one should go through that alone. And if I don't get custody, if the judge decides he should stay with his parents, then we'll fight that decision. Ethan deserves to stay with people who truly care about him. The next day, David looked for a lawyer who worked with family cases. Dr. William listened to the whole story carefully. It's a complex case, said the lawyer. The biological parents have rights, but abandonment can be proven. Do you have documents that prove Ethan lives with his grandmother? He's enrolled in school with her home address, explained David. And there are the medical bills, all under Mrs. Margaret's name as the responsible party. That's good. We also need witnesses who can confirm the parents' abandonment and the grandmother's care. The neighbor, Mrs. Gladys, can testify, and the school teachers also know the situation. Perfect. We'll file for permanent custody for the grandmother, with you as a support guardian. What do you mean, support guardian? A person who can make decisions about the child when the grandmother isn't available. It's a way to formalize what you're already doing. David felt a strange emotion. He had never thought about the possibility of being officially responsible for a child. When Mrs. Margaret was discharged from the hospital 3 days later, David took her home along with Ethan. The house was clean and organized, thanks to the care David had taken during the week. Wow, everything is so tidy, observed Mrs. Margaret, looking around. David fixed everything, Grandma, said Ethan proudly. He even fixed the kitchen faucet that was dripping. David, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. No need to thank me, Mrs. Margaret. It was a pleasure. But David knew the situation was far from resolved. Richard had indeed hired a lawyer and was contesting Mrs. Margaret's custody. A week later, David received an unexpected call. It was Jennifer. "Hi, David. It's Jennifer, Ethan's mother." "Hi, Jennifer. I need to talk to you. Can you meet me today?" David was suspicious, but he agreed. They arranged to meet at a diner near the hospital. Jennifer was a 32-year-old woman, blonde, well-dressed. She seemed to have a comfortable life, which made David wonder why she had abandoned her son. "David, I'm going to be direct with you," Jennifer said as soon as they sat down. "Richard told me that you want to file for custody of Ethan." "That's not exactly it. The request is for his grandmother, Mrs. Margaret, with you as the guardian." "Yes," Jennifer sighed and stirred the coffee she had ordered. "Look, I know you must think I'm a terrible mother." "I think you abandoned your son," David said bluntly. Jennifer lowered her head. "You're right, I did abandon him, but it wasn't out of malice." "Then why was it?" "I got married very young. I had Ethan very young. When I separated from Richard, I was emotionally destroyed. I thought it would be better for Ethan to stay with Grandma Margaret, who always took good care of him. But you could have kept visiting, been present in his life. I know I was wrong." Jennifer began to cry softly. "My new husband didn't want me to keep in touch with my previous life. He said it was better to make a clean break, start from scratch." "And you agreed?" "I was in love, David. I made the wrong choices." David felt a little sorry for Jennifer, but not enough to excuse the abandonment. "Jennifer, why are you telling me this now?" "Because Richard wants to go to court to get custody of Ethan, and I can't let that happen." "Why?" "Because he doesn't really want Ethan. He just wants to avoid paying child support. If he gets custody, he'll put the boy in a boarding school and that's it." The revelation shocked David. "How do you know that?" "Because he called me and told me the plan. He said that if Ethan was a boarder, he wouldn't need to worry about anything else." David felt a growing anger in his chest. "And you're going to let him?" "No," Jennifer said with determination. "I've made a lot of mistakes, but I won't let Richard do that to Ethan." "What do you intend to do?" "I will testify in favor of Mrs. Margaret. I will tell the judge that Richard doesn't have the emotional capacity to take care of Ethan." David was surprised by the turn of events. "Jennifer, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you want to be a part of Ethan's life again?" Jennifer was silent for a long moment. "I would like to, but I know I don't deserve it. Ethan doesn't even know me anymore. In his mind, I'm just the woman who abandoned him. He's just a child. Children forgive. Do you think so?" David thought of his own mother, who had abandoned him and never tried to contact him again. "I think it's worth trying, but gradually, without pressure." Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 2 weeks later, the case went to a hearing. Dr. William had gathered all the necessary evidence, school records, medical records, witnesses, and even recordings of the phone calls in which Richard and Jennifer refused to take care of Ethan during the week of the hospitalization. Ethan was nervous on the morning of the hearing. David had explained that he wouldn't need to speak to the judge, but the boy was worried. "What if the judge decides I have to live with my dad?" Ethan asked while they were having breakfast. "That won't happen," David said, trying to sound confident. "The judge will see that you're happier with your grandmother." "But what if he doesn't?" David crouched down in front of Ethan. "Ethan, no matter what happens, I will always be your friend. Always. Promise?" "I promise." At the courthouse, the situation became even more tense. Richard had hired an expensive lawyer and was confident he would get custody. "Your Honor," Richard's lawyer said to the judge, "my client is the child's biological father and is fully capable of caring for his son. He has a stable job, a high income, and wants to give the boy the best possible education." "And where was this paternal interest when the child's grandmother was hospitalized?" Dr. William asked when it was his turn to speak. "My client was working, fulfilling his professional responsibilities. Are his professional responsibilities more important than his own son's well-being?" Richard's lawyer didn't know how to respond. "Doctor." William then presented all the evidence, the recordings of the phone calls, the witness testimonies, Ethan's school records showing he had always been under his grandmother's care. Your Honor, said Dr. William, this child has been in a situation of de facto parental abandonment for over 3 years. The grandmother has been the only consistent parental figure in his life. When it was Jennifer's turn to testify, she surprised everyone with her brutal honesty. Your Honor, I abandoned my son, she said, her voice choked with emotion. It was the worst decision of my life, but I did it. Richard abandoned him too. The only person who has always taken care of Ethan was Richard's mother, Mrs. Margaret. And Mr. David? Asked the judge. What is his interest in this case? Mr. David, said Jennifer, looking at him, was the first person who really cared about Ethan's well-being when he needed help. He didn't know us at all, but he didn't hesitate to take care of my son when his father and I failed. Mrs. Margaret was also called to testify. Mrs. Margaret, said the judge, you are 64 years old and have health problems. Are you sure you can take care of a child? Your Honor, Mrs. Margaret replied firmly, I have raised Ethan since he was 3 years old. He is my life. As for the health problems, I now have David helping me. He has become like a son to me, too. The judge then called Ethan to speak with him privately in his chambers. David waited outside, nervous, along with Mrs. Margaret. What do you think he's asking him? Murmured Mrs. Margaret. He probably wants to know who Ethan would prefer to live with, replied Dr. William. 15 minutes later, Ethan came out of the judge's chambers holding the social worker's hand. His eyes were red, but he was no longer crying. Ethan, called David, is everything all right? The boy nodded but didn't want to talk about what he had discussed with the judge. The trial was adjourned so the judge could analyze all the testimonies and evidence. The decision would come in a week. During that week of waiting, David noticed that Ethan was quieter than usual. One night, while helping the boy with his homework, David decided to bring up the subject. Ethan, do you want to talk about what you told the judge? Ethan stopped writing and looked at David. He asked me who I wanted to live with. And what did you say? That I wanted to live with Grandma Margaret and with you. And did he say anything? He said you can't be my father because you don't have the papers for it. David felt his heart tighten. Ethan, I don't need papers to love you like a son. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. You love me like a son? David swallowed hard before answering. It was the first time he had said those words out loud. Yes, Ethan, I love you like a son. Ethan threw himself into David's arms, crying with emotion. I love you like a father, too, the boy whispered. At that moment, David understood that no matter what the judge decided, Ethan was already his son in his heart, and he was already the boy's father in every way that truly mattered. On the day of the decision, the whole family was gathered at the courthouse. David, Mrs. Margaret, Ethan, Jennifer, and even some neighbors who had come to show their support. The judge read the sentence with a solemn voice. After analyzing all the testimonies and evidence presented, this court rules to maintain custody of the child, Ethan Reynolds Wilson, with his paternal grandmother, Margaret Reynolds Wilson. Mrs. Margaret sighed with relief, and Ethan smiled for the first time in a week. Furthermore, the judge continued, considering the emotional bond demonstrated and the fundamental role played by Mr. David Michael Johnson in the child's well-being, he is also appointed as a support guardian with the right to make decisions regarding the child when necessary. David couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had been officially recognized as responsible for Ethan. Visits from the biological parents are established as bi-weekly and supervised until they demonstrate a change in their parental behavior pattern. Richard left the courthouse furious, but Jennifer approached David and Mrs. Margaret. Thank you so much, she said sincerely. You will take good care of Ethan. I know you will. Jennifer, said David, the door is always open for you to get to know your son better. But no pressure, on his own time. Jennifer nodded, her eyes full of tears. Maybe in a few months I can start visiting him very gradually. We'll keep talking, House said Mrs. Margaret kindly. 3 months after the court's decision, life had found a new routine. David had moved to a bigger house near Mrs. Margaret's to be able to take better care of both of them. Ethan was happier and felt safer at school. His grades had improved significantly and he had made new friends. Mrs. Margaret, with proper medical treatment and fewer worries, was in much better health. She and David had developed a perfect partnership in caring for Ethan. Jennifer had started making bi-weekly visits, always accompanied by David or Mrs. Margaret. The relationship with Ethan was still delicate, but there was progress. The boy had started calling her by her name instead of the woman. Richard, on the other hand, had completely disappeared after losing custody. He no longer made the visits established by the judge and was constantly late with child support payments. One Saturday afternoon, David was helping Ethan fly a kite in the backyard when the boy asked a question that caught him off guard. "David, would you like to be my real father?" "Ethan, I already am your real father. It might not be on paper, but in my heart I am." "No, I mean on paper, like adoption." David stopped holding the kite string. "Ethan, adoption is a very serious thing, and you already have parents. But they don't really want me. You want me." "Ethan, please, David, I want to have your last name. I want people to know that you are my father." David looked at Mrs. Margaret, who was sitting on the porch watching the conversation. "Let's talk to your grandmother about this, okay?" That night, after Ethan went to sleep, David and Mrs. Margaret talked about the boy's request. "Mrs. Margaret, what do you think?" "David, Ethan has never asked anything like this of his biological parents. He really sees you as his father, but it's a very big decision, a lot of responsibility." Mrs. Margaret smiled. "You've had that responsibility for months. The only difference would be on paper. And what if one day I can't take proper care of him? David, you already take better care of him than his own biological parents. Ethan is a happy and secure child by your side." David became thoughtful. "How would it work legally?" "We would have to go back to court, but with our history, I think it would be approved." The following Monday, David went to see Dr. William to ask his questions about the adoption process. "David," said the lawyer, "considering you are already Ethan's legal guardian and that the biological parents have shown a lack of interest, the process would be simpler." "Simpler how?" "You would have to prove that you are capable of raising the child, that there is an emotional bond, and that it is in Ethan's best interest. You already have all of that." "And the biological parents? They would have the right to contest it, but considering the history of abandonment, it would be difficult for them to win." David spent the whole week thinking about the proposal. It was a huge step in his life. He had always been a single, independent man, with no major responsibilities beyond himself. But at the same time, he couldn't imagine his life without Ethan. The boy had become the most important thing to him. At the end of the week, David made his decision. "Ethan," he said during dinner, "we're going to file the adoption petition." Ethan dropped his fork on the plate and looked at David with shining eyes. "Really? Really? But are you sure this is what you want? Once I'm officially your father, there's no going back." Ethan got up from his chair and hugged David tightly. "I'm sure. I want to be Ethan Johnson." Mrs. Margaret watched the scene with tears in her eyes. "My two boys," she murmured. The adoption process lasted 6 months. During this period, David underwent several psychological evaluations, interviews with social workers, and home visits. Jennifer was consulted about the process and, to everyone's surprise, gave her consent. "If Ethan wants David as his father, I won't stand in the way," she told the lawyer. "David has already been more of a father to Ethan than I ever was a mother." Richard, on the other hand, tried to contest the process, but his lack of involvement in his son's life worked against him. "Your Honor," his lawyer said at the hearing, "my client does not agree with the adoption because he still has hopes of rebuilding the relationship with his son." "And where were these hopes for the last 6 months?" asked the judge. "Mr. Richard did not make any of the visits established in the previous ruling. He was busy with professional matters, the same professional matters that prevented him from caring for his son when he needed help." Richard's lawyer couldn't argue against the facts. Ethan, now 8 years old, was again called to speak with the judge in private. "Ethan," asked the judge, "are you sure you want Mr. David to be your adoptive father?" "I'm sure, Your Honor," Ethan replied firmly. "David has been taking care of me for almost a year. He helps me with my homework, takes me to the doctor when I need it, plays with me. shows me affection. He is my real father. And you won't miss your biological father? Ethan thought for a moment before answering. Your Honor, do you have a father? I do. Does your father abandon you when you need him? No. Then you know the difference between a real father and a father in name only. The judge was impressed by the boy's maturity. Ethan, if I approve this adoption, you will be named Ethan Johnson. Are you prepared for that? I am prepared, Ethan replied, smiling. I will be very proud of that name. 2 weeks later, the decision was published. The adoption was approved unanimously. On the day the documents were signed, Ethan was radiant with happiness. David, he said as they left the courthouse, can I call you Dad now? David knelt in front of the boy and hugged him tightly. You can always call me Dad, Ethan. You are my son now. Forever? Forever. Mrs. Margaret watched the scene with a heart full of gratitude. She had gained not only a happy grandson, but also a son in her heart. The celebration party was small, but full of love. Some neighbors, Ethan's teacher, Jennifer, who had become a more constant presence in the boy's life, and even Dr. William were present. Ethan, David said during the party, I have a surprise for you. What surprise? David handed an envelope to the boy. Inside was the new birth certificate with the full name Ethan Johnson Wilson. Now it's official, said David. You are my son in every sense. Ethan looked at the document and then hugged David. Thank you for not giving up on me, Dad. Thank you for giving me the chance to be your father, son. 2 years later, Ethan was 10 years old and had become a completely different child from the one David found crying in the street asking for help. He was confident, happy, got excellent grades in school and had developed a passion for soccer. David never missed a game. He was always in the stands cheering for his son. Mrs. Margaret, now 66 years old, was in stable health and loved her role as the official grandma. She and David had become a perfect team in raising Ethan. Jennifer had gradually rebuilt her relationship with her son. Now she visited him every week, and Ethan had started calling her Mom Jennifer. It wasn't the same as having a mother present from the beginning, but it was a start. Richard had disappeared completely. He stopped paying child support, changed his phone number, and no one had heard from him since. Ethan occasionally asked about his biological father, but without showing sadness or longing. One Sunday morning, David was making pancakes for breakfast when Ethan came running down the stairs. Dad, look what I wrote at school. Ethan handed him an essay titled My Family. David began to read. My family is small, but it's the best family in the world. My dad's name is David, and he's a delivery driver. He found me on the street when I was little and scared. Since then, he has never abandoned me. My grandma Margaret has taken care of me since I was born. She makes the best carrot cake in the world and always knows when I'm sad just by looking at me. My mom Jennifer didn't used to live with me, but now we see each other all the time. She is learning to be a mom again, and I am learning to have a mother. Some people think it's strange that my dad isn't my birth father, but I think being a father isn't just about making a baby. Being a father is about caring, teaching, playing, giving affection, and never abandoning. My dad David chose me. He didn't have to take care of me, but he chose to. That is more special than anything. I love my family, and I know they love me too. And that's all that matters. David finished reading the essay with teary eyes. Ethan, this is beautiful. The teacher said she's going to use my essay as an example for the class. I'm so proud of you, son. Ethan hugged David. Dad, do you regret helping me that day? David looked into the boy's eyes. Ethan, that day wasn't the day I helped you. That was the day you saved me. What do you mean? Before I met you, I just lived for work. I didn't have a family. I didn't have anyone to love. You taught me what it means to be truly happy. Ethan smiled. So we saved each other? We saved each other, David confirmed. Mrs. Margaret appeared in the kitchen at that moment. Those pancakes are going to burn if you two keep talking over there, she said, laughing. Grandma, look at my essay, said Ethan, showing her the paper. Mrs. Margaret read it all carefully and then hugged her grandson. I'm so proud, my angel. You wrote exactly the truth. Grandma, can I ask you a question? Of course. Are you happy with our family the way it is? Mrs. Margaret looked at David and then at Ethan. Ethan, I have never been happier in my life. You two are the best gifts God has given me. Even though you know we're a different kind of family. Ethan, said Mrs. Margaret, sitting down at the table, family isn't about who shares the same blood. Family is about who chooses to stay together, care for each other, share joys and sorrows. And this is the closest family I have ever seen. David served the pancakes and the three of them sat down for Sunday breakfast. It was a simple scene, but full of love. Dad, said Ethan with his mouth full, there's a presentation at school next week. Will you be able to go? Of course I'll go. I wouldn't miss it for anything. And can Grandma go too? If I'm in good health, I will go, said Mrs. Margaret. And if Mom Jennifer wants to go too? David and Mrs. Margaret exchanged glances. If she wants to go and you feel comfortable, of course she can, said David. Ethan smiled, satisfied. Our family is growing, huh? It is growing, David agreed. That afternoon, while Ethan played in the backyard, David and Mrs. Margaret talked on the porch. David, can I ask you a personal question? Of course, Mrs. Margaret. Have you never thought about getting married, giving Ethan siblings? David became thoughtful. Sometimes I think about it, but Ethan takes up so much of my time and my heart that there isn't much room left for other things. You're still young, David, 30 years old. You have the right to build your own family too. Ethan is my family. He is, but you could have more family. A wife, other children. David looked at Ethan playing in the backyard. Mrs. Margaret, I already have everything I need. Ethan is more than enough to make me happy. But what about when he grows up? When he leaves home to build his own life? Then I'll be proud of him and I'll continue being his father, even from a distance. Mrs. Margaret smiled. You are a good man, David. Ethan was very lucky to find you. I was the lucky one that he found me. 6 months later, something unexpected happened. David was working when he received a call from Ethan's school. Mr. David, you need to come here urgently, said the principal. Did something happen to Ethan? It's not with him, it's about him. Can you come, please? David cancelled his deliveries and rushed to the school. When he arrived, he found Ethan sitting in the principal's office with a worried look. Ethan, what happened? Dad, I didn't do anything wrong, I swear. The principal called David to talk in private. Mr. David, Ethan didn't do anything wrong. In fact, he did something very beautiful. How so? Today, during recess, Ethan saw a younger boy being picked on by bigger kids. The boy was crying, and the kids were laughing at him. David listened carefully. Ethan didn't hesitate to defend his classmate. He put himself in front of the bigger kids and told them they should stop being mean. Then he brought the boy to the teacher's lounge so we could take care of him. And where is the problem? There is no problem at all. On the contrary, I'm calling to congratulate you on the upbringing you've given Ethan. He demonstrated admirable solidarity and courage. David felt his chest swell with pride. Can I talk to him? Of course. Ethan entered the room with a look that showed he didn't know if he was in trouble or not. Dad, I just wanted to help Jimmy. He was very sad. David knelt down in front of his son. Ethan, you are not in trouble. You did the right thing. I did? Yes, you did. I am very proud of you. Really? Really. Do you remember the day you asked me for help on the street? I remember. You did for Jimmy the same thing you did for me. You helped someone who was in need. Ethan smiled. It's just that I remembered what you always say, that we should help people when they need it. Exactly. And you are learning it just right. The principal watched the conversation, moved. Mr. David, we rarely see children as empathetic as Ethan. You can be sure you are raising a special boy. That night during dinner, Ethan told Mrs. Margaret everything. Grandma, Jimmy is very tiny, and the big boys were being cruel to him. And you defended him. I did. I told them it wasn't nice to make others cry. How proud I am, my grandson. You have a very good heart. Grandma, is it normal to want to help others? Mrs. Margaret and David exchanged glances. Why that question, Ethan? Because when I see someone sad, I get sad too, and I want to help. but some boys at school think that's silly. Ethan, said David, wanting to help others is one of the most beautiful things in the world. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. Even when it's difficult? Especially when it's difficult. 2 months later, Ethan turned 10. To celebrate, David organized a party in the backyard with all his school friends. Dad, this is the best party of my life, said Ethan in the middle of the celebration. Why? Because everyone I love is here. David looked around. Mrs. Margaret was talking with the mothers of Ethan's friends. Jennifer was helping serve the snacks. Dr. William had attended with his wife. Even some neighbors were present. It really is a special party, agreed David. Dad, can I ask you something? You can ask for anything. It's your birthday. I want to make a speech. David was surprised. A speech? Yes, I want to thank everyone. David picked up a spoon and tapped his glass to get everyone's attention. Everyone, the birthday boy wants to say something. Ethan climbed onto a chair to be taller. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to my party. Everyone paid attention to the boy. I wanted to thank some special people. First, my dad, David, who taught me that being a father is about choosing to love someone every day. David felt his eyes fill with tears. I want to thank my grandma Margaret, who always took care of me and taught me what real love is. Mrs. Margaret wiped her eyes with her apron. I want to thank my mom Jennifer, who is learning to be my mom again, and I'm really enjoying it. Jennifer smiled emotionally. And I want to thank all of you for being my chosen family, because family isn't just who you're born with. Family is who chooses to stay together. The audience applauded emotionally. Several people were crying. Ethan got down from the chair and hugged David. Thank you for choosing me, Dad. Thank you for letting me choose you, son. That night, after everyone had left, David was cleaning up the party mess when he found Ethan sitting on the porch looking at the stars. Ethan, aren't you sleepy? Dad, can I ask you a question? You always can. Ethan settled better into his chair. If you could go back in time to the day you found me on the street, would you do everything again? David sat down next to his son. Ethan, if I could go back in time, I would do everything exactly the same. But you know what I would change? What? I would adopt you faster, so you wouldn't have to spend even one day wondering if you were really my son. Ethan smiled. Dad, even when I was just your ward, I already felt like your son. How did you know? Because you treated me like a son. You worried about me, got mad when I did something stupid, were proud when I did well in school. You were always my dad, even before the paperwork. David hugged Ethan. You were always my son, even before I understood that. Dad? Yes? I love you. I love you too, Ethan. More than anything in this world. Father and son stayed there on the porch, looking at the stars, each thinking about how life can change in completely unexpected ways. David remembered the day he was just a single, 28-year-old delivery driver with no major responsibilities or purposes. Now he was a father. He had a family. He had someone who depended on him and someone worth fighting for every day. Ethan thought about what his life would be like if David hadn't stopped to listen to him that day on the street. He'd probably be in an institution or passed from relative to relative, never having the security of a stable family. Dad, said Ethan, breaking the silence. When I grow up and have my own children, I'm going to tell them the story of how you saved me. Ethan, you know you don't have to see me as a hero, right? I just did what anyone should do. But not everyone would have done it, Dad. You could have helped me that day and then disappeared. But you stayed. David thought about his son's words. Do you know why I stayed, Ethan? Why? Because the moment I saw you asking for help, I recognized myself. I saw the boy I used to be, and I promised myself that I would never let a child go through what I went through. You went through that alone. I did. My grandmother loved me, but she was always worried, always tired. I was always afraid that she would abandon me too. And did she abandon you? No. She took care of me until the end. But I carried that fear for a long time. Are you still afraid? David looked at Ethan. No. Now I am sure. I will never abandon you, and you will never abandon me. We are family forever. Family forever, repeated Ethan. 2 years passed. Ethan was 12 and had become a responsible and caring pre-teen. David was 32 and had been promoted to coordinator at the delivery company. Mrs. Margaret, now 68, had become a beloved figure in the neighborhood. Whenever someone needed help with children, she was the one they called. Jennifer had divorced her second husband and was rebuilding her life. Her relationship with Ethan had grown much stronger, and she was now an integral part of the family routine. One Saturday morning, David was woken up by Ethan knocking on his bedroom door. Dad, wake up! Ethan, it's 6 in the morning, it's Saturday. Dad, there's a woman at our door with 2 little boys. She's crying. David got up immediately. He put on a t-shirt and went to the front door. There was indeed a young woman there, who couldn't have been more than 25, with 2 small children. One looked about 4 and the other about 2. Can I help you? Asked David. Sorry to bother you so early, said the woman through tears. My name is Ashley. I heard about you around the neighborhood. Heard what? That you helped children, that you saved a boy and became his father. David looked back at Ethan, who was behind him watching the scene. What happened? I have nowhere to live with my children. Their father threw me out of the house last night, said he can't stand the children crying anymore. David felt his heart tighten. Do you have any family? I have no one. I'm from another state. I came here with him, but now I have nowhere to go. Ethan approached David and whispered, Dad, she needs help, like I needed it. David looked at the 2 children. They were wearing dirty clothes, their hair was messy, and they had a frightened look. Ashley, have you all had breakfast? She shook her head no. Come in, let's prepare something for you to eat and then we'll talk. Ethan helped David prepare sandwiches and milk for the children. Mrs. Margaret, woken by the commotion, came to help too. Poor little things, murmured Mrs. Margaret, watching the children eat hungrily. How long has it been since you ate properly? Since yesterday morning, Ashley replied, ashamed. After the children had eaten, David talked with Ashley about her options. Ashley, do you have any job skills? I worked as a cleaning assistant before I came here, but here I never found work because I had no one to leave the children with. And their father doesn't help? He drinks a lot. When he's drunk, he gets aggressive. I was afraid he would hurt the boys. David understood the situation. Ashley was in a vulnerable social situation with 2 small children to care for. Ashley, I know some people who can help you. There are places that offer temporary housing for mothers with small children. I don't want to give my children up for adoption, she said quickly. No one is talking about adoption. I'm talking about help for you to rebuild your life with your children. Ethan was playing with the 2 children in the living room when he approached David. Dad, isn't there a way she can stay here for a few days until she finds a better place? David looked around. The house had 2 bedrooms. One was his and one was Ethan's. There was no space for a family. Ethan, we don't have the room. I can sleep on the couch for a few days. No, son. That's not fair to you. Mrs. Margaret, who was listening to the conversation, approached. David, my house has the room that used to be Ethan's. They can stay there for a few days while we look for a solution. Mrs. Margaret, that's 3 people. It will be a lot of work for you. David, have you forgotten how you came into my life, asking a child for help? David understood the hint and smiled. You're right, Mrs. Margaret. Ashley stayed at Mrs. Margaret's house for 2 weeks. During that time, David helped her look for a job and housing. Jennifer, who had become a social worker, helped with the paperwork and social benefits. Ethan loved having other kids around and became like a big brother to the little ones. Dad, Ethan said one night, it's cool to help other families. Why do you think that? Because we know what it's like to need help. We know how important it is to have someone who cares. David was impressed by his son's maturity. Ethan, would you like to help more families like this? I'd like to very much. Then I have an idea. The following month, David, Mrs. Margaret, and Jennifer formalized a small social organization in the neighborhood called Welcoming Family. The goal was to help families in vulnerable situations. especially mothers with small children. They got donations from local residents and business owners and set up a support network with volunteer social workers, psychologists, and lawyers. Ethan became the organization's mascot, always present at activities and adored by the children who came through. "Dad," Ethan said one evening after a day helping at the organization, "now I understand why you saved me." "Why?" "Because it wasn't just to save me. It was so I could learn to save others too." David stopped driving for a moment and looked at his son. "Ethan, you're 12 years old, and you already think like an adult. It's because you taught me to think about others, not just myself. And what do you plan to do with that when you grow up?" Ethan became thoughtful. "I want to be a social worker, like Mom Jennifer. I want to help kids who are like I was." "And what were you like?" "Lost, scared, not knowing if anyone cared about me." David felt his heart fill with pride. "Ethan, your heart is as big as the world. I learned from you, Dad." 3 years later, Ethan was 15 and had become an admirable young man. Tall for his age, responsible, studious, and with a natural charisma that attracted people of all ages. The Welcoming Family organization had grown and had helped more than 50 families over the years. David had become a reference in the community as someone who always helped those in need. Mrs. Margaret, now 71, was physically slower, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She had become the official grandma to all the children who came through the organization. Jennifer had become the technical coordinator of Welcoming Family and had found her true calling helping other mothers in difficult situations. One September afternoon, Ethan came home from school with news that surprised David. "Dad, the school principal called me in today. Did something happen? She said I was selected for a full scholarship at a private school. The scholarship covers everything: materials, uniform, transportation, everything." David stopped washing the dishes and looked at his son. "Ethan, that's wonderful. How did you get the scholarship?" "It was because of my grades and the work I do with the organization. The school has a program for young people who stand out socially, and you want to accept it?" Ethan was silent for a moment. "Dad, can I be honest?" "You always can." "I'm a little scared." "Scared of what?" "The school is fancy, Dad. The students must be rich. What if they don't like me? What if they find out I was adopted? What if they think our family is weird?" David sat down next to his son. "Ethan, do you remember what I always taught you?" "What?" "That a person's worth isn't in how much money they have or how they were born. Their worth is in their character, their kindness, how they treat others." "I know that, Dad, but sometimes other people don't know that. And if they don't know, that's their problem. You can't stop yourself from growing because of other people's prejudice." Ethan thought about his father's words. "Do you think I should accept it?" "I think you should do what your heart tells you, but remember this opportunity could give you the tools to help even more people in the future." "How so?" "If you study at a good school, you can get into a good university. If you get into a good university, you can graduate in something that lets you help a lot of people." Ethan smiled. "Okay, I'll accept the scholarship. I'm proud of your courage, son." Ethan's first day at the new school was tense. David took him personally and waited outside until he was sure everything was okay. "Dad," Ethan said before going in, "if someone asks about our family, what should I say?" "The truth, that you have a family that loves you and chose to stay together. And if they think it's weird, then they don't deserve your friendship." Ethan entered the school with his heart pounding. The school was truly impressive. Modern buildings, state-of-the-art labs, professional sports courts. During the first recess, some classmates approached him. "Hi, you're the new Ethan, right?" asked a blond boy. "Yes, I am." "I'm Matthew. Where did you live before?" "Right here in Riverside. I went to a public school." "That's cool. And what do your parents do?" Ethan took a deep breath before answering. "My dad is a coordinator at a delivery company and works at a social organization that helps families in need." "That's great. And your mom?" "My biological mother is a social worker, and I live with my dad and my grandmother. Are your parents separated? Actually, said Ethan, deciding to tell the whole truth. My dad adopted me when I was 7. The boys grew curious. What do you mean? Ethan briefly told his story, how he met David, his grandmother's hospitalization, the adoption process. Dude, that's an amazing story, said Matthew. Your dad must be a really great person. He's the best person in the world, Ethan replied with pride. And you have this organization that helps other people? We do. We've already helped more than 50 families. The boys were impressed. Ethan, you have to tell us more about that. Maybe we can help too. Ethan hadn't expected that reaction. He had imagined he would be rejected or seen as different, but his classmates were genuinely interested in his story. When David went to pick him up at the end of the day, Ethan was beaming. So, son, how was it? Better than I expected, Dad. The guys are cool and they were interested in our organization. That's great. You were worried for nothing. Dad, can I ask you a question? Of course. When you adopted me, did you imagine I would get this far? David thought for a moment. Ethan, when I adopted you, I just wanted to give you a family. I never imagined you would become the incredible person you are today. What kind of person am I today? A good, smart, generous, courageous person. A person who makes a difference in other people's lives. Ethan smiled. I learned from the best. During the following months at the new school, Ethan stood out not only for his grades, but also for his natural leadership. He organized food drives for the welcoming family and mobilized his classmates for volunteer activities. The school principal called David in for a meeting. Mr. David, I want to congratulate you on Ethan. Is there a problem? On the contrary, Ethan is one of the most exceptional students we have ever had here, not just because of his grades, but because of his character. David felt his chest swell with pride. He has always been a special child. Mr. David, may I ask a personal question? Of course. How did you two meet? Ethan mentioned he was adopted. David told the whole story, from the first meeting on the street to the present moment. What a beautiful story, said the principal with emotional eyes. You saved that boy's life. Actually, he saved mine. How so? Before Ethan, I was just a man working to survive. He gave me a purpose. He taught me what unconditional love is. He showed me how one person can make a difference in another's life. The principal was silent for a moment. Mr. David, we have a program at the school where we invite inspiring people to give talks to the students. Would you like to participate? Talk about what? About your experience. About how a simple act can change lives. David became thoughtful. I've never spoken publicly about this. Think about the possibility. Your story could inspire many young people. That night, David told Ethan about the principal's invitation. Dad, you have to accept. Why do you think so? Because our story can help other people. It can inspire others to help children in need. You wouldn't mind if I told our story to other people? Dad, our story is beautiful. I'm proud of it. Even the part about your biological parents abandoning you. Ethan thought for a moment. Dad, that part of the story is important because it shows that sometimes the people who are supposed to love us can't. But there is always someone willing to love for real. In my case, it was you. David hugged his son. All right. I'll accept the principal's invitation. David's talk at Ethan's school was a success. He told the whole story from the beginning, from the meeting on the street to the present moment. The students listened in absolute silence, many with tears in their eyes. To finish, said David, I want you to understand one thing. Any one of you can change someone's life. Sometimes it's just a matter of stopping to listen, of caring, of not walking past when we see someone in need. A student raised his hand. Mr. David, what would you say to people who think helping others is not their problem? David thought before answering. I would say that nowadays everyone is always talking about being happy. But true happiness doesn't come from having things. It comes from making a difference in other people's lives. Another student asked, Mr. David, have you ever regretted the decision? David looked at Ethan, who was sitting in the front row. Never. Not for a second. Ethan taught me that family isn't who you are born to. Family is who chooses to stay together. After the talk, several students approached David wanting to know how they could help the Welcoming Family organization. "Dad," said Ethan when they were heading home, "you were amazing." "You think so?" "I'm sure. You inspired a lot of people today." "Ethan, can I tell you a secret?" "Sure." "I was nervous about telling our story to other people." "Why?" "Because I was afraid people would judge us, that they would think our family is strange." "And what did you think?" "That our story is beautiful indeed, and that we have nothing to be ashamed of." "Dad, you always taught me to be proud of who I am." "It was time for you to apply that to your own life." David laughed. "Sometimes the student teaches the teacher, huh?" "Sometimes," agreed Ethan with a smile. 2 years later, Ethan was 17 and preparing for his college entrance exams. His grades were excellent, and he had several options for majors and universities. David, now 37, had become a respected figure in Riverside. The Welcoming Family had become a recognized institution, supported by the city government. Mrs. Margaret, 73, had slowed down, but was still the heart of the organization. All the children called her Grandma Margaret, and she loved the role. Jennifer was in a serious relationship with a man who adored Ethan and respected the family they had built. One Sunday morning, Ethan was studying when he received an unexpected call. "Ethan, this is Richard." Ethan was in shock. It was the first time he had spoken to his biological father in almost 10 years. "Hi," Ethan replied, not knowing what to say. "Ethan, I know it's been a long time since we talked." "It has. I would like to meet you, talk to you." Ethan was silent. "Ethan, are you there?" "I am, but I don't know if I want to talk." "Please give me a chance. Just a conversation." Ethan looked at David, who was in the living room and had noticed it was an important call. "I need to think about it," said Ethan. "Okay, you have my number now. Call me whenever you want." Ethan hung up the phone and stood still, processing what had happened. "Who was it?" asked David. "Richard, my biological father." David felt his heart race. What did he want? "To talk to me." "And do you want to talk to him?" Ethan sat on the couch next to David. "Dad, can I ask you a question?" "Always." "Are you afraid that I might want to go back to him?" The question hit David like a punch to the stomach. "Ethan, you think about that?" "No, Dad, I never have, but I want to know if you're afraid of it." David took a deep breath before answering. "Sometimes, yes. I'm afraid you might discover there's something better than our family." "Dad, look at me." Ethan held David's face with both hands. "There is nothing better than our family. You are my father, forever, no matter what happens." David felt his eyes fill with tears. "I know, Ethan, but sometimes fear isn't rational." "Dad, can I meet with Richard?" "Why do you want to?" "Curiosity, I guess. And maybe it would be good to have closure, to tell him in person that I'm okay, that I have a family that loves me." David thought about the proposal. "If you want to, I'll go with you." "You would do that?" "Ethan, I would do anything for you." The meeting was scheduled for the following week at a neutral diner. Ethan was nervous but determined. Richard had changed a lot. He was thinner, had some grey hair, and looked tired. "Ethan," he said as they sat down, "you've grown so much." "I have," Ethan replied formally. "And you must be David," said Richard, looking at David with a mixture of respect and discomfort. "That's me," David replied. Richard was silent for a moment. "Ethan, I wanted to apologize." "Apologize for what, specifically?" "For abandoning you, for not being the father you deserved." Ethan looked at David before answering. "Richard, I accept your apology, but you need to understand that David is my father now, in every sense. I know, and I'm happy you found someone who would take proper care of you." "Why did you leave?" Ethan asked directly. Richard sighed. "Because I was immature. Because I thought taking care of a child would mess up my life. Because I was selfish. And now I regret it every day. I lost the chance to see you grow up, to be your real father." Ethan became thoughtful. Richard, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Do you have other children? No. Do you have... I never remarried. Why? Because I was always afraid of repeating the same mistakes. David was listening to the whole conversation in silence, trying to understand Richard's motivations. Richard, said Ethan finally, I'm okay. I have a family that loves me. I'm doing well in school. I have plans for the future. What plans? I want to study social work, help children who are like I was. Richard looked at David. You raised an incredible boy. He was already incredible, replied David. I just gave him love and support. Ethan, said Richard, can you forgive me? Ethan thought for a long moment. I can forgive you, but I can't forget. And I can't pretend that we're father and son because we're not. I understand. You gave me life, but David raised me. You gave me life, but he gave me love. Richard nodded, his eyes full of tears. Ethan, can I ask you for one thing? Go ahead. Can I check in on you from time to time? I don't want to be your father. I just want to know that you're okay. Ethan looked at David, who nodded. You can text me on my birthday just to see how I'm doing. Thank you, Ethan. That means a lot to me. When they left the diner, Ethan was thoughtful. How do you feel? Asked David. Relieved, replied Ethan. I thought I would feel angry at him, but I just felt sorry for him. Sorry, why? Because he lost the chance to know me, to be my father, and that's a very big loss for him. David was impressed by his son's maturity. Ethan, you have a very good heart. I learned from you, Dad. 3 months later, Ethan received the news that he had passed the entrance exam for social work at a public federal university. His score was one of the highest in the program. The celebration party was emotional. The entire extended family was present. David, Mrs. Margaret, Jennifer, several young people who had been helped by the welcoming family over the years, teachers, neighbors. Ethan, said David during the party, I need to tell you something. What is it, Dad? When you were 7 years old and asked me for help on that street, I never imagined you would get this far. Where, Dad? To university? Not just to university. You've become a man I admire. You are a better person than I ever was. Ethan hugged David. Dad, you gave me all the tools to get here. Everything I am, I owe to you. Ethan, everything you are comes from your own heart. I just helped you develop it. Mrs. Margaret approached the two of them. My boys, she said emotionally, I'm so proud of both of you. Grandma, thank you for taking me in when I was little. Ethan, you brought joy to my life when I needed it most. Thank you. Jennifer also came closer. Ethan, I want to tell you something. What, Mom Jennifer? Even though I abandoned you, you became a better man than I could have raised. David did a wonderful job. Ethan looked at the 3 people he loved most in the world. I'm very lucky, he said. I have a family that truly loves me. And we are lucky to have you, replied David. 6 years later, Ethan was graduating with a degree in social work. During college, he had done internships at the Welcoming Family, at other social organizations, and even in public agencies. His undergraduate thesis was on the impact of family fostering on the lives of children in vulnerable situations. The work was based on his own experience and the hundreds of cases he had followed over the years. David, now 43, had become the executive director of the Welcoming Family, which had grown and become a reference in the state. Mrs. Margaret, 79 years old, had retired from more intensive activities but was still an advisor to the organization. Jennifer had gotten married and given a younger brother to Ethan, a boy named James, whom Ethan adored. At Ethan's graduation party, David gave a speech that moved everyone. 16 years ago, David said into the microphone, I was just a 28-year-old delivery driver who thought I knew what life was about. The audience listened in silence, until a 7-year-old boy stopped me on the street and asked for my help. At that moment, I thought I was helping him, but in truth, he was saving my life. Ethan smiled from the head table. Today, that boy is graduating in social work. He's going to leave here and help hundreds, maybe thousands of children throughout his life. David looked directly at Ethan. Ethan, you started out as my son. Today, you are my hero." The audience gave a standing ovation. Ethan stood up and hugged David on stage. "Dad, thank you for believing in me before I even believed in myself. Thank you for teaching me what real love is." 2 years later, Ethan was working as a social worker for the city of Riverside, coordinating child and youth protection programs. He had specialized in cases of parental abandonment and foster care. David had expanded the welcoming family to other municipalities and had become a national reference in social assistance policies. One afternoon, Ethan came home from work with special news. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I met a girl." David smiled. "Tell me about her." "Her name is Emily. She's also a social worker. She works with children with disabilities." And I'm in love." David laughed. "That's great, Ethan. When do I get to meet her?" "If you want, I can bring her over for dinner on Sunday." "Of course I want to meet her." The following Sunday, Emily came to dinner at David's house. She was a simple young woman of 25, with a contagious smile and an evident passion for working with children. "Emily," David said during dinner, "Ethan told me you work with special needs children." "Yes, I do. It's a challenging area, but very rewarding." "How did you two meet?" "At a training session on children's rights," Ethan replied. Emily gave an amazing presentation on social inclusion. "And when Ethan introduced himself," Emily continued, "telling your story and about the welcoming family, I was impressed." "Impressed by what?" asked Mrs. Margaret. "By your story, by how a simple act can change so many lives." After dinner, David called Ethan for a private conversation. "Ethan, I really liked Emily." "Really?" "Really. She seems like a good person, with the same values as you." "Dad, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I want to marry her." David was surprised. "Ethan, you haven't known each other very long." 2 months. "But Dad, when you know, you know." David smiled, remembering when he decided to adopt Ethan. "You're right, when you know, you really do know. Will you give us your blessing?" "Ethan, you don't need my blessing to be happy, but you have it." Ethan hugged David. "Dad, I want you to be my best man at the wedding." "It would be an honor, son." The wedding of Ethan and Emily was simple but moving. It was held at the neighborhood church where Ethan had grown up, with a reception in the hall of the welcoming family. During his speech, Ethan thanked everyone who had been part of his journey. "I want to especially thank my father, David," Ethan said, his voice emotional. "Dad, you taught me that family is a choice. Today I choose to start a new family with Emily, but you will always be my original family." Emily also gave a speech. "David, thank you for raising the man I love. Ethan is generous, affectionate, and dedicated because he learned that from you." After the ceremony, David was talking with some guests when a woman approached him. "Excuse me, are you the David who founded the welcoming family?" "Yes, I am." "My name is Barbara. My daughter and my grandchildren were helped by you 5 years ago." David remembered the case. "Oh yes, Ashley with the 2 young boys." "Exactly. I wanted to thank you. How are they doing?" "Great. Ashley got a steady job. The boys are doing well in school. They have a decent life now." "That's good to hear." "David, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you do this? Why do you dedicate yourself so much to helping others?" David looked over at Ethan, who was dancing with Emily. "Because one day someone taught me that true happiness comes from making a difference in other people's lives." "Who taught you that?" "My son, when he was just 7 years old." 3 years later, Ethan and Emily had their first child. David was at the hospital when the baby was born and was one of the first people to hold his grandson. "What are you going to name him?" asked David, looking at the baby in his arms. "David Michael," answered Ethan. "What do you mean?" "We want to name him after his grandpa," explained Emily. David was too emotional to speak. "Dad," said Ethan, "you saved my life. Now I want your name to live on in our family." "Ethan, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, Dad. Just agree to be the best grandpa in the world." David looked at the baby who carried his name. "Hi, David Michael," he whispered to the baby. "Your dad is the most amazing man I've ever known, and you are going to grow up in a family full of love." That night at home, David was on the porch looking at the stars when Mrs. Margaret joined him. She was 82 years old, slower, but with a mind as sharp as ever. "David, what are you thinking about?" "About life, Mrs. Margaret. About how things have changed. For the better? Much for the better. Do you remember the day you met Ethan?" David laughed, like it was yesterday, a desperate boy asking me for help. "And did you imagine it would lead to this? Never. I thought I was just helping a child in trouble. But it was so much more than that. It was the beginning of a family." Mrs. Margaret smiled. "David, can I tell you something?" "Always. I am very proud of you, of the man you became, of the father you were, of the grandfather you will be." "Mrs. Margaret, thank you for welcoming me into your family too." "David, you weren't welcomed into my family. You created a new family, a family based on love, not blood. You are part of this family too. I know, and it's the most beautiful thing in my life." 5 years passed. Ethan was 28 years old and was already the father of 2 children, David Michael, who was 5, and a girl named Maggie, who was 2, named after her great-grandmother. David was 50 years old and had become a national reference in social assistance policies. The welcoming family had expanded to 5 states and had already helped over 1,000 families. Mrs. Margaret had passed away at 85, sleeping peacefully in her bed, surrounded by the love of the family she helped build. Jennifer was happy in her marriage and maintained a close relationship with Ethan and the grandchildren. One Saturday morning, David was playing with his grandchildren in the backyard when David Michael asked a question that reminded him of Ethan at the same age. "Grandpa, why don't you and Dad have the same face?" David smiled. "It was the same natural curiosity all children have. Because your dad is the son of my heart, not my belly." "What do you mean?" Ethan, who was watching the conversation, came over. "David Michael, come here. I'm going to tell you a story." The boy sat on his father's lap. "What story, Dad?" "The story of how I met Grandpa David." Ethan began telling his son the same story David had told him so many times, about the boy who asked for help on the street, about the grandmother who fell ill, about the family that was formed by love. David Michael listened carefully. "And you stayed together forever?" "We did," answered Ethan, looking at David. "And will I stay with you forever too?" "Forever," David and Ethan answered at the same time. That afternoon, after the children went to sleep, Ethan and David talked about the future. "Dad, I have a proposal for you." "What proposal?" "I want to write a book about our story." "A book?" "Yes. A book about family, about love, about how small actions can change lives." David became thoughtful. "Do you think people would be interested in our story?" "Dad, our story has inspired hundreds of people over the years. It can inspire many more." "And what would this book be like?" "It would tell our whole journey, from the first meeting until now. It would show that family is a daily choice of love." David looked at the photos on the wall, him and Ethan over the years, Mrs. Margaret, Jennifer, Emily, the grandchildren. "You know something, Ethan? Let's write this book." "Really? Really? If our story can inspire even one person to open their heart to a child who needs help, it's worth telling." Ethan hugged David. "Dad, thank you for making my life a story worth telling. Thank you for making my life a story worth living." 2 years later, the book, Please Follow Me, was released and became a national success. The story of David and Ethan inspired thousands of people to get involved with adoption and foster care. On launch day, father and son were together in the bookstore signing copies for a huge line of readers. "Ethan," David said during a break, "did you ever imagine our story would go this far?" "Dad, true love stories always go far. And do you think our story has a happy ending?" Ethan looked around, Emily taking care of the kids, Jennifer talking with other readers, the hundreds of people interested in their story. "Dad, our story doesn't have an ending. It continues every day." "What do you mean?" "Every child who is helped because of our story Every family that is formed by love, every person who decides to make a difference in someone else's life, our story continues through them. David smiled. You're right. Our story is just the beginning. A woman approached the signing table with a child about 6 years old. Mr. David, Mr. Ethan, thank you for writing this book. Why? Asked Ethan. Because after reading it, my husband and I decided to adopt. This is Matthew, our son, for 3 months now. The boy looked at David and Ethan with curiosity. Are you the ones from the book, the ones who became father and son? Yes, we are, answered David, crouching down in front of the child. That's so cool. I also have parents who chose me. Ethan felt his heart fill with gratitude. Matthew, do you know you're very lucky? Why? Because you have parents who truly love you. Like your dad loves you? Like my dad loves me. When the signing session ended, David and Ethan walked to the car in silence, absorbing everything that had happened. Ethan, David finally said, do you remember what I told you the day I met you? What? That everyone deserves to have someone who cares. I remember. I think we managed to prove that, right? Ethan stopped walking and hugged David in the middle of the street. Dad, you didn't just prove that. You lived it. Every day for 22 years. And I'll keep living it for the rest of my life. Forever? Forever. Father and son continued walking, knowing that their love story had become much bigger than themselves. Every person inspired by their words, every child welcomed by families who chose to love, every act of kindness motivated by their journey, all of this was the continuation of a story that began with a simple request on a street in Riverside. Please, follow me. And David followed, and Ethan grew up. And together they built something that neither time nor distance could destroy, a family based on unconditional love. End of story. Now tell me, did our story move you? Do you believe that small actions can completely change lives? Leave a comment telling us what you thought and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other stories that touch the heart. Your opinion is very important to us.